Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to patch 7.38. I think it's something we were all hoping for, and this is a huge patch, and there's some great changes in this patch, so I'm really excited. I didn't make videos for the last couple weeks because I thought we were going to get a patch like 2 weeks ago, but thankfully, 2 weeks, hey, that's fine. A little bit of a delay, that's not that big of a deal. At least it wasn't like a month or two. That kind of would have been crazy. The other thing is, it did coincide with me being sick, so I'm on the mend, I'm kind of better, but I still have like a little bit of a cough. You might notice that my voice sounds a little bit different here, so just warning you there. But I'm still going to go through the patch notes. We're going to cover everything, not in extreme detail or specific detail, but just kind of hitting all the highlights. And I think it's going to be a great patch. I'm actually really excited for all the things they added. So without delaying further, let's just get into these big changes. And the first one, that is the main change, a better, wetter world. It's titled that because basically now, instead of just having a stream or river through the center of the map, they have a stream or river in the side of the map at each safe lane. And the big thing about this is basically that you increase your movement speed when you're running in the river towards your safe lane. But it doesn't really do much for you when you're running against the stream, if you're running like towards your base, but it does help you get out to your safe lane faster, which can have a decent impact on the game. It kind of buffs the safe lane in general, but it obviously buffs your farming speed if you're going to be walking around in that area. And the map has been pretty big since they expanded it, obviously, so we'll see how much of an impact this has. I mean, it can have impacts in fights too and things like that. It can kind of be a little bit weird and awkward, but I don't think it's going to be huge, but it is interesting. It's something like unique that I don't think they've really ever tried before. It just has this little, movement speed thing on the floor of the map, which is just, it's very unique. So I don't think it's a huge deal. I'm not going to say, oh, this is terrible, this is ruining anything. I'm also not going to say, oh, this is amazing, this changes the game completely, because it doesn't really. It just adds a little bit of an extra flavoring there, something extra, something unique, something different to kind of mix things up, which is pretty cool. Then the next thing is just that they added neutral creeps, so I'm not really going to cover that thoroughly here, but basically, yeah, there are new neutral creeps, which is pretty cool. Always like it when they buff or change or add neutral creeps in some way. It just gives the jungle a little bit more flavor, which is nice. Then the next thing are the shrines, which are actually a huge deal because basically where the wisdom rune was and also where the lotus orbs are, now there are these shrines. It's no longer a click battle. Basically, you have to be in this AoE here in both of these, and you have to be the only one in there. In other words, you can't have enemies in that AoE or else you won't get the lotus or you won't get the experience. So basically it's a battle like to the death or until someone runs away, which is way better than just like, okay, we're both there, we're running at it, now just whoever clicks better. That's kind of boring, it's not that great. Now there's a lot more consideration because if the enemy has numbers, you probably just want to run away. Or maybe you think that you can battle them to the death and then you can get that channel time while you sit in there. So it's like capture the flag, or it's kind of like King of the Hill in that way, which is pretty nice. I actually like this change a lot compared to the old just like clicking battle, which is, it's not that great. It's not a great mechanic. This definitely changes it up enough to where they don't completely eliminate these, mechanics, but they make it more interesting and actually more involved in the gameplay and strategic in a way, which is pretty cool. I like that. Then the next thing, this is probably the biggest change of the patch, I would say, and it's the best change of the patch. People have been asking for this, like, basically for probably 10 years. Like, I don't know if it's actually been 10 years, but maybe something like that. Before, they said, okay, the Roshan pit was just in this one side of the map, and now, like, can we just have 2 Roshan pits? Can we move it to the other side? People were asking for that for a long time. They kind of did that, but they switched it, obviously, to the ends of the map and the corners of the map when they expanded the map, which felt really weird. I almost think that they did that because they wanted you to, like, try to play around the big part of the map, like, force people to actually use the map in a way when they first expanded it. But I think if this wasn't always the plan at some point, I feel like it should have been, because this is exactly what you want from Roshan, is that the old pit is kind of back where it was, and then there's a new pit now on the south and on the Radiant side, kind of actually not exactly where the old pit was, if you remember, like 15, 20, and then 20 years ago or whatever. Like the old pit was actually on the Dire side, but on the south end, kind of in the corner. But it's not there anymore, but it's still in the river, whereas exactly where it should be. And Roshan now moves back and forth just like with day and night like he did before, which is pretty cool. And then the tormentors are now kind of like along with Roshan, but they're on the corners of the map where Roshan used to be, which I think is pretty cool. I really like this because I always hated the Tormentor and where it was. I just thought this was so dumb. Like, a lot of times you'd be winning a game and then your team would want to go back to where the Tormentor is, and that was just the most annoying thing of all time. It was just like, dude, we need to push the lanes in. We need to have map control. If anything, let's take their Tormentor, not like waste all this map control and all this time going back to our Tormentor. It just felt really awkward, and even if you're losing, I guess that's something you can do. But then half the times, if you're losing, you just get your Tormentor taken anyway, so it doesn't even really help you. It was just really awkward and weird. I like that it's actually an objective out on the map now, that there's some risk in taking, and it doesn't like completely kill your map control either, because you can still TP from side to side with those warp from side to side still. That still is a thing, but it's mainly just for changing lanes or also for getting Tormentors, which is nice. And then there are some terrain changes. I'm not going to go through all of them, but basically you can do this slider here. But then actually this is a huge change here that isn't really mentioned all that much, but there's a low ground here where the river flows through in front of each tier 2 tower, which I think is pretty important. Just look out for that. I think that is something that's not really mentioned too much, but it is significant. It does have a big impact on the game. Then the next big change is neutral items have kind of been rearranged a little bit. And I'm of the opinion, and pretty much have been of the opinion, that neutral items are annoying and I don't really like them in general, but I think they were kind of necessary to kind of stop games from going, 2 or 3 hours long. They do that effectively, and they add a little bit of a dynamic to the game, but they kind of complicate things in a weird way, and a lot of times you just default to picking one neutral item. Well, now, depending on the hero and depending on what you're doing, it's pretty obvious which one you should get. But now you actually have to think about it a little bit, because basically you kind of, as you kill neutral camps, you get basically a currency here, which is Madstone. And then once you get enough of that, and you also get it from clearing the camps, so then your teammates get some of it too when you clear a camp, which is good, so you don't actually have to farm camps as a support. And then you can craft your neutral items. And your neutral items are now one ability, so, it's similar neutral item abilities to what they had before, as you see some of these same neutral items that used to be there. And then basically stats, so health, regen, lifesteal, damage, all this kind of stuff. So basically every neutral item is now like a combination of these two things, and you can craft your own, which is pretty cool. It makes it a little bit more strategic in that way, which I do like. It's not just like luck of the draw. They've been trying to change this up a lot, where it's like, okay, before it was you just got random drops, then it was, you get to choose from these different ones. Now you get to choose from two, things, an ability and stats, which is nice. It makes it a little bit more skillful, and that's kind of the thing that I always didn't like about neutral items, is it was just so random. And especially early on in the early days of neutral items, you would get like a Huskar with the perfect item, and then you just lose the game because he got that item. And that's just really not fun. So having this where pretty much every hero gets to choose something that's probably going to benefit them at every single point of the game is pretty nice. And also it's easy. You can see what everyone has, which is great. So it's not like you're like guessing what somebody has, which is nice. But obviously it makes it a lot more complicated now. It's not just like click the best one. You actually have to think about it, maybe for a little bit, maybe until we get used to it. Then it's going to be like, okay, well, I'm the, carry, so I just go for this specific ability, which is pretty straightforward, and then the damage one or whatever. There's probably going to be still good ones, overpowered ones for each role and stuff like that. That's still going to happen. But this is a nice, unique, and interesting change. I pretty much think, at least in my opinion, without getting into it and playing a bunch of it, obviously, that this is probably the best neutral items have been since they came out. That's my personal opinion. That's what I think is like happening here. It's actually unique and interesting, takes some skill, takes some strategy, isn't kind of just random and weird like it used to be. So that's neutral items. I do like that a lot. And then the quality of life stuff is pretty nice. Roshan timer. Mark for sell is a huge one. That's just really big quality of life. You can mark something for sale and then it automatically sells, or your courier takes it back to base and sells it, which is great. Just makes item management a lot easier. New effects to just let you know what's going on with like spells and stuff, because that can oftentimes get confusing with all this crazy stuff happening in the game. Attribute display. That's just like something that they needed to update because there wasn't really a good way of seeing that. Then timers, if you hold Alt, you can see a bunch of these different timers. That can be helpful in general. I mean, obviously there's a lot of people that just have the natural timer in their head, but this just takes a lot of that like skill out of the game, which people argue is not that great, but there's so many things in Dota that I don't think it's that bad. You still have to know what to look for, hold Alt to look at that. Like, you still have to think about it. It's just not something where you have to have it ingrained in your memory and there's no indication on the screen. Like, now at least you have a screen indication. People for years were saying, oh, we're not going to see mana bars on enemy heroes. That's now in. You can also see enemies' items just by going up to them instead of clicking on them on the map, all that stuff. That stuff is just, I think it's fine. Like, people have been mad about that kind of thing for a long time. I'm not really one of those purists. I think it's fine to take that kind of skill, you know, those skill things out of the game and just give it, like, give these easy markers for people, because it's not that big of a deal. You know, you still have the grand overall strategy that is really important, and that's really not being taken away from the game in every single way. These other things, it's good quality of life, I would say. And then when you first get an item, you can quickly switch it into your items if it goes into your backpack directly without it being like on that delay that it usually has, which again, a good quality of life thing in general. Now we're going to go on to the patch notes now, and basically I'll just highlight some things or kind of skip over and just mention them if we already did cover them. So major changes, basically they nerfed universal heroes a lot, so they get a lot less damage from each stat, from 0.7 to 0.45. Now they have adjusted the universal heroes like base damage and stuff, and it's saying that here to like kind of compensate, but that still is a pretty big universal hero nerf. We'll see how that ends up panning out, but I feel like since they got universals, or they created universal heroes and they put them in the game, they've always kind of been a little bit broken and a little bit annoying. That is another change along with neutral items that I'm not a huge fan of, so we'll see how that develops over time. Then some other things, like you can put skill points in at level 2 in just stats, not a huge deal. Some easier things to understand, like reflection now just reflects spells straight up, like with all the bonuses they can get. Slow resistance is buffed a little bit. Now your minimum move speed is a little bit higher. This is a big one, actually. Glyph of fortification, creep duration decreased from 4 to 3. Now this isn't like the biggest change of all time, but glyphs have definitely been a problem. It's been a problem for a long time. For, I don't know, a few years now, they have made it so you get a million glyphs, it feels like. And now, like before, you would just have, like maybe 10 years ago, there would just be one glyph, you would have it, it would go on cooldown, and it would just be for the towers. That was it. No creeps, none of that. And over the years, a lot of the stuff has been buffed, rightly so in some ways, because obviously the heroes, you know, there's this power creep, but still, it's gotten to the point where it's a little bit too much, and pushing the base is kind of annoying. So I like that they're kind of decreasing this so that, you know, the creep wave will die pretty quickly, because it's not going to get glyphed for the full time, which I like that. And the towers also now being glyphed longer than the creeps, so it will, you know, that timing that you all often had to like, oh, well, when do I glyph so that I get the most out of it, so I get the most damage on the creeps? That's still obviously a thing, but it's not as relevant now. You're probably going to kill the creep wave when it's approaching your tower, when you glyph it and stuff like that. And then, you know, just some other things. Units no longer gain bonus movement speed at night. I don't know how big of a deal that is. That sounds like something where it's like, that's not a big deal. But this could actually kind of be a big deal. It's just kind of one of those weird things. It's just like a small, minor change, but it actually could affect the game a lot. Maybe not as much as a lot of these other things, but still, this could be kind of a big deal. And then we already talked about the items in your backpack. And then the wandering waters, that's the stuff I already talked about. You know, the streams or rivers on the side in your safe lane that increase your movement speed. This is just giving you more detail there of how that works. And then Roshan, this just details all the things of how it's being moved from the 2 pits, very similar to how it was on the sides of them, in the corners of the map, but now it's just in those pits, which I really like that. I love that change a lot. Tormentors, I already kind of mentioned that. They're now in the corners, which is great, and kind of work kind of based on Roshan away as well. They also changed the ability a little bit there. I'm not going to, you know, get into that, but there are some changes with how the tormentors work, but it's not the biggest of deal. Yeah, after dying, it also leaves health regen in an AoE, which is nice because, you know, sometimes you're very low health. And now, especially since it is like out on the map, it's a little bit more risky. It makes sense for them to add this kind of thing. Then Lotus Pools and Shrines of Wisdom, I kind of already talked about that. That is something where I really actually like this change. It's really good. It's more strategic. It's actually a battle. It's not just a clicking battle. It's actually like a fighting battle, kind of King of the Hill type of thing, which is really, really good. And then they did change bounty rooms. Spawn interval increased from 3 minutes to 4 minutes. That's, you know, a little bit less gold on the map, that kind of stuff. And then gold provided after the initial set rescaled. So basically 36 plus 9 per 5 minutes to 40 plus 6 per 4 minutes. I'm not sure exactly about the math on that. I mean, initial gold is obviously more, but 6 gold for 4 minutes, I don't really know exactly how that works, but it seems like it's probably less gold per minute, but, you know, surely someone's taking the time to put the math into the graphs and show you when it is more or less. I don't know. That's not, this isn't the video for that. They did change bounty room gold. I don't think it's the biggest of deals. So we can get into these other changes, other terrain changes. The most important one here really is the corner outposts have been removed, and that's obviously because Roche is no longer there. The only outposts that exist now are in your triangle, and those are for, if you're getting aggressive onto the enemy base, you can obviously buy back TPN, that kind of stuff. Now, those are closer to the Roshan pits, respectively, so you can kind of get in there. Either team can get in there. Maybe they're across the map and now they're contesting your TPing there because you don't have any towers left, that kind of thing. So outposts still exist, but they're not as relevant on the sides of the map and the corners of the map because there's not as much to do there anymore, which I like that they're kind of bringing the map closer in. Yes, they expanded it. You can still go to those places. It's maybe good for split pushing or escaping or running around, ganking, all these kinds of things. That's great. There are more neutral camps than there were before when they didn't expand the map, obviously. But I like that they're kind of bringing everything into a central location, kind of forcing fights more, making everything a little bit central. I do like that about this change in general and the Roche and all that kind of stuff. Then last for these general changes, there's lifesteal changes. I'm not going to get into all the specific details. I think the ones that matter the most are lifesteal or spell lifesteal don't apply to pure damage anymore. You also can't get spell or lifesteal from spell damage against illusions, which is interesting. So there are these kind of nerfs to how lifesteal works, especially with this pure damage and with, this spell lifesteal in the AoE and stuff for things like Leshrac or things like Axe, this kind of stuff. That is important, I think. Bloodstone became a very good item over the last year or two, and so this is kind of a nerf to that in some ways, but it's also a change in how lifesteal works across the board. It says, at the top here, you can just read individual abilities no longer have special rules about how lifesteal works in different situations. Lifesteal mechanics are now consistent. So I do like when they kind of make things less complicated overall and in the guts of the game. It kind of just okay, this is lifesteal, spell lifesteal, and general damage lifesteal. This is how it works. I do like that. So now spell lifesteal applies to basically all spell damage, anything from a spell, which is nice. It's interesting that it's working that way instead of this weird what is spell lifesteal, what is physical lifesteal. It was just it was a little bit awkward. They're kind of clarifying that a little bit, but I'm not going to go into too much more detail than I am, than I just said right there. But it is slightly a nerf and slightly a clarification that makes things a little bit simpler, but it will change the dynamics of lifesteal overall. Then next is neutral creep updates, and basically I already mentioned that they did add neutral creeps, but I didn't mention any of the specifics. So now we can get into basically the meat of what is actually here. Well, in the rivers, wherever a neutral camp is, now they have new neutral creeps in each of those camps. And basically at 15 and then 30 minutes, the camps will evolve to the next tier. So easy become medium, medium become hard, hard become ancient, but they only do it twice. So easy don't eventually become ancient, but it is pretty cool that now on the map, there are ancient camps all over the place, it seems, once it gets past 30 minutes. That's pretty cool. And then these camps will evolve over time, which is an interesting concept. I don't think they ever had that before. That's pretty cool. I do like this idea. I'm not sure how it's going to affect the game. It seems a little bit interesting because now the camps get harder, plus there's also more gold on the map over time. So that's just kind of an interesting dynamic change that is kind of extreme in a way, but I do like all these kind of cool mix-ups and changes. Hey, at this point, I think why not? There's already been so many crazy things. This is a pretty good idea. I like this idea. I'm not going to get into all the different little creeps here. I mean, there's so many abilities, damage, all that kind of stuff. That's really in the weeds. If you want to do that yourself, you can. I'm sure there are other people, other videos that go into all of that. But basically, those are all the different camps or creeps that are in those different camps at the river. And then they also brought back ancient prowlers, which I don't know why they even got rid of them before. I liked that there was this kind of more, heavy damage dealing, but also weak to magic damage kind of ancient camp. It did make stacking ancients more annoying, and people didn't like that as much to clear through with, something like a Sven or whatever. But hey, I don't care. That's fine. Luna, Sven, Gyro, you guys are having trouble with this. Well, who cares? So what? It's more of a risk. It takes more health, all that kind of stuff. I like these guys. I like that they're returning into the game. That's pretty cool. And then they just changed some things about these two other neutral creeps. But yeah, I like the neutral creep changes. So far, I like this patch a lot with all these general changes. They're pretty cool. But now we're going to get into items. Now for item updates, I'm really not going to get into every single item. Only really the big ones am I going to touch on. So I'm going to skip over a block of cheese, not a huge deal. Bottle, this actually is a big deal because now you can't TP in as a support or something from the base and refill your mid's bottle. And I never really liked that. I mean, in the past when there was one courier, you could send your courier back to base with the bottle and refill it, and that was always a weird thing. I just, this is something where I don't really love it because it's very much team coordination centric and people mess it up all the time, and it's just not great for pubs. And then even in pros, like that's fine, they can coordinate that kind of stuff, but it's just like a weird gimmick kind of thing that doesn't feel like it should be in the game, so I kind of like that they took it out. Then Orb of Blight, you know, Blightstone now renamed because now we basically have 3 orbs. It just kind of does the same thing. It just, the duration for the corruption lasts a little bit less than it did before. But now they have Orb of Frost, which is a new item, and this is the one that slows. And Orb of Venom no longer slows, it does damage over time. So basically we have minus armor, we have a slow, and then we have damage over time. And that's really the big difference here. This one also reduces target's incoming healing by 13%. So that's a big deal, not just for the Frost in general, but also for the upgraded item, which I'll mention in a bit when we get to that. But that's a kind of a big deal. For 250 gold, this general reduction of healing can be significant, just to have that little bit of extra reduction in healing if you're against a Huskar or a Morphling or any hero that relies on healing or has a lot of lifesteal. That can be kind of a big deal. 13% isn't a lot, but for the amount of gold you're spending, it's really not that big of a deal, or not that much for how much you're getting. Then Sentry Ward has been buffed, which I kind of like that. Sentry Wards, it just feels like there's not enough of them and they're not big enough AoE, especially now that the map is so big. I'm going to skip over some of these. Windlace, small change there, but not a huge deal. Abyssal Blade, this is a big deal, I think, because in the past, Abyssal Blade had Skull Basher, Vanguard, and a recipe. It feels weird because Vanguard is a very defensive item. It's very much like an off-laner item. It's not really a carry item, and Abyssal Blade is a carry item. I mean, Skull Basher is a melee carry item, so why would you want to get Vanguard? It just feels awkward. But now you get Skull Basher, Sange, and the recipe, which is great because basically now it's more, carry centric, because a Sange is something that a carry would want for lifesteal, for amping up the slow resistance and the health and lifesteal amp, all that kind of stuff. It's just really good in general to have that on Abyssal Blade rather than the damage block from Vanguard. So now you can see you get all of these things and you don't get the 250 health and health regen, which I don't think people really need once they even get the full Abyssal Blade late in the game anyway. I don't think it's really that good. So I do like that they changed this with Abyssal Blade, and I'll actually in a minute show you that they did change another item as well to kind of switch where Vanguard goes and where Sange goes, which is something I really like. Actually, I like this change a lot. I never really thought of it, but it is important. Battle Fury is an interesting one. So they changed this a little bit. Basically, the damage has been decreased, but the cost has also been decreased. So I don't think this cleave damage is really that big of a deal. 10%, it's not, it's not the end of the world. The real thing is 15 damage can be pretty significant, but now 200 gold cheaper, I mean, that is important because now you have 2 broadswords instead of a claymore. So that makes enough of a difference where, I mean, the earlier you get your Battle Fury, the better. Obviously, later on in the game, it just makes Battle Fury not as good to keep in your inventory, if it's like 60 minutes, because that's 15 damage. If you have crit and all this other stuff, that can be significant. So I don't know. I think this makes Battle Fury better in the sense of it's a good farming item early, but it's just not as good to keep into your inventory later if you can, afford to get rid of it. Bloodstone nerf, I think definitely needed. Bloodthorn nerfed, definitely needed. Basically, there's less AoE here, and now there is a Dispel on cast, but it's not that big of a deal, I think. Bloodthorn, the basic nerf on this one is just that now when you apply it to an enemy, all of your allies don't get that true strike, that extra, amp up of damage, which was huge on a lot of different heroes. It is still a good item, I think, but it's just you and your, creeps or anything you control that gets that added extra, which is nice. It's a good nerf. I think this was a really good item in the last few patches, and same thing with Bloodstone. Then Boots of Bearing and Drum of Endurance, not really a huge change. Really, Drum just lost the charges, which I think is cool. Charges are really weird. This is just like an outdated thing that it just seems odd that Drum even had charges to begin with. Like, this was the last one that had it. It was the last one to change. I think I don't even remember what the last thing. I mean, I guess you still have charges on Earn and stuff, but that's a little bit different. It's like you can gain more charges. This one, you have to buy a new recipe. It's just awkward. It's like an outdated thing that is finally gone, so that's good. Ethereal Blade, slight nerf. Then I have Scotty, just a small change there because now the Frost Orb or Orb of Frost is included. So that is a change there for Scotty, but not a huge deal. Then Heaven's Halberd, that's the one that's been changed along with Abyssal Blade, where now Heaven's Halberd no longer has the Sange, now it has the Vanguard, which is really good because this is more of an offlane defensive item. And that's kind of what I think you want it to be. So now, you know, offlaners that get Vanguard, they can easily go into Heaven's Halberd and feel good about that. Like if it is an Axe on the offlane, he always felt awkward because let's say he does want to buy a Vanguard, which is good on the hero, but people were skipping it because it upgrades into Abyssal. That's really not something you want to be having on the hero. But now it upgrades into Heaven's Halberd. That is actually pretty good on the hero in general. Just, you know, in certain situations. Obviously, you do want the enemy to attack you a lot of the time, but if you can have this afterwards or you're dying or just good on specific heroes against specific heroes, I don't think that's a bad thing to have. And obviously, Axe is just the one example. A lot of these other, you know, let's say Underlord, that's another one. You don't need people to attack you, so having Heaven's Halberd is good, and having Vanguard is good. I think that's a great change. I like how they switched that up. Gleipnir is a weird one. They definitely nerfed this item a lot. Now it doesn't include Maelstrom anymore. Now it's just a point booster. So the item costs a lot less, but it's not just a natural farming item that you get from having Maelstrom anymore, which is kind of an interesting change. Now it's just straight up, okay, it just does this in an AoE, just locks people down. Now it's just an upgrade to Rod of Atos. That's pretty much what it is. And it's just not nearly as good as it once was because all the Maelstrom stuff is just gone, and it gives you, I guess, a little bit more of, you know, some things there, but it's obviously cheaper. So health bonus is increased, but like, do you really care about that much? I mean, I guess if you're buying the Rod of Atos, you might care about that, but it doesn't give that, you know, universal hero that you want to buy Gleipnir every single time. Like that was just huge on those kinds of heroes. Now it's not nearly as good as it once was. And that's obviously, like I said, a big nerf to universal heroes too, because this was an item that was bought on every single universal hero in like every game, it felt like. Then Mage Slayer changed a little bit. I think this is a nerf to this item. Just a little bit awkward. Like you get now 5 health regen and damage, which I guess is fine, but 15 attack speed is a pretty big deal. Intelligence is kind of whatever, but still it's just a little bit awkward. I don't think it's as good of an item as it once was. I mean, it's decreased like by 25 gold in the cost, but that's not enough to really make a difference. I just think overall it's not that great of an item. It does have Orb of Venom now. So Orb of Corrosion, or Orb of Venom, Orb of Slow or whatever, and Blight, Orb of Blight. Those are all now included in these bigger items, each one. So now they have all those 3. Then Orb of Corrosion has been changed now too, and now this one is the Orb of Blight, the Orb of Frost, and a Band of Elven Skin. And now the big thing with this is it provides agility, but it also provides 20% of reduction on incoming healing for any target when you're attacking them. So basically 20% reduction in healing, and that's pretty good. I mean, this is a pretty cheap item, 1,000 gold. I mean, that is kind of expensive, I guess, but for 20% healing reduction, that can be huge in very specific games. So I think that is an interesting kind of, a lot of bang for your buck there, like in very specific matchups. Then Phylactery and Conda have been reworked or nerfed completely. So Phylactery, heavy nerfs here. And then upgrades into Conda no longer has a Chrysalis. So it's no longer a right-click item, really, because obviously you're not buying a Chrysalis. It no longer, you know, deals attack damage here. Really what this is, it's a break item now. So it removes the critical strike, but it applies break, which is a huge deal. And Power Spell now applies break to the target, disabling their passive abilities, obviously. So that is huge because there was never a good break for any spellcaster. So now you have break on Silver Edge for any right-clicker and the added, you know, benefit of Invis. You still have Phylactery with the slow and the damage and all that kind of stuff, and then upgrade into Conda. That's still something natural for like a Zeus, let's say. It also is better for a Zeus in general, in just the sense that Zeus never really wanted to right click. Now I know there's the shard and all that, but it's just awkward. So most like spellcasters don't really have that added right click, and having this as like a Luna exclusive item or just Morphling, it's just weird. I don't like that there's only a few heroes that use it, so I'm glad that those are nerfed in general. But now that you have a break on a spellcaster, that can be absolutely huge. I like that kind of inclusion into the game in general. And then Revenant's Brooch, I've said this a million times, this needs to be changed. I don't even know if this is going to make it a, you know, item that anyone's going to buy though, because yes, the total cost is 3,300, which is a lot less. So, I mean, maybe it is something, it's kind of like a small item now instead of a huge item. So that can be significant. But, and I guess they did kind of nerf the, you know, well, what was once an active is now a passive, but it's still a little bit awkward. So grants each attack a 30% chance to deal bonus magic damage equal to 80% of the attack damage. So now it is the same kind of thing where your attacks now can deal magic damage, but it's a little bit awkward because 30% chance, is that enough? I don't know. Like, and this is only in really, really specific situations where you're against like a necro and stuff. Those are the obvious ones. Now, there are going to be situations where, you know, your attacks doing magic damage is going to be better or deal more damage overall than just having right-click damage. If there's like heavy armored heroes, that can be good too. So I don't know. It's a weird one. Who knows? I like that they made it a lot cheaper. I like that they changed it. This item definitely needed a change. I just don't know if it's enough to push it over the edge, but who knows? We'll see. Maybe this is like a huge, big item in a lot of different matchups. It just depends how the meta evolves. Then we have some small changes here to S&Y, Shadow Blade, Silver Edge, nothing really that big. Solar Crest, Tranquil Boots, Wind Waker, all this like Wind Lace change, which is not really a big deal at all. And then Witchblade, a small change as well, which now requires Orb of Venom. Like I said, they're having these smaller items build into more things, so more people are going to be buying it early. Because in the past, you know, no one really bought Orb of Venom because it was really only good for one thing, and people didn't like Orb of Corrosion that much. But now that it builds into these other things, you can actually get some early use out of it, without wasting it, which I do like. That is kind of nice. So then we can go on to neutral item updates, and I'm not really going to cover these too much because this is all the specifics of something I already covered, which is basically that, you know, you get those different shards or different pieces when you farm, and then you kind of put them all together at each tier, and you get these unique items that you craft. And I'm not really going to get into all of the details there, but they did upgrade or increase or change the neutral items in general with the different abilities and the stuff that you can get. I think neutral items are better overall now, to be honest, just because you can actually pick the effect and the stats that you want specifically for yourself. So they did upgrade that in the way, but then they changed all these abilities. And again, I'm not going to go through all of them because there's a lot of the same ones. There are a lot of new ones, but I don't really think it's, you know, honestly, I just don't like neutral items very much. I don't think they're hugely relevant to the game. Like, everyone gets one. It's a nice little bonus. It's kind of fun, but you kind of just pick the best one that you know you're going to need because you're a carry and you need damage and this carry ability. And that kind of happens every single game. So I'm not going to go through all of these. I almost skip over neutral items all the time because there's so much information. There's so many of them. I feel like it's just a waste of time. Over time, you're going to learn which ones are best, and then you're just going to pick those. So those are all the abilities. Now, these are all the enchantments. Like, I'm not going to spend in a billion years, you know, talking about all those. I know sometimes there's a comment or two. They're like, why did you skip the neutral items? I'm like, dude, just relax. Okay. It's just the neutral items. You're not going to even, like, dude, I don't think any human ever has even known what all the neutral items do by heart. Like, why would you? You just pick the one that's good on your hero. And like, I don't know if that's going to change. Maybe it will. And if that does, that's going to be cool. If the way they change this makes it more dynamic. But I don't know, I have my doubts. I still think this is the best that neutral items have been, probably. But still, I still doubt the concept overall. Then for heroes, I'm just going to hit the basics, kind of go through each hero and only really highlight the things that are the most important. And some heroes I'm just going to skip over for the most part because they're not really touched in any significant way. This was more of a general patch. Sometimes some of the heroes, they don't really get a lot of love because the big changes about the map and stuff are really the things that are the important parts of the patch. So Abaddon, not really touched other than the, you know, universal heroes have been adjusted. That's really the biggest thing. Alchemist has changed a little bit. You get this 75 GPM when you share Ag Scepters. That's not a huge deal because that's late game, like 75 GPM is kind of whatever. Acid Spray AoE reduction can be significantly, you know, different there. That is kind of a big deal. But really the thing that this hero, you know, the big change on the hero is that corrosive weaponry is just like the afterthought of the hero. It can be significant late game, don't get me wrong, but you would always get it last, max it last. Now maybe you can at least get 1 point in it because when enemies take damage from acid spray or unstable concoction, you get a stack of corrosive weaponry every time that happens. So that can be pretty good. You can maybe get 1 point in this early, you know, maybe even in the laning stage to actually take advantage of this. That could change the build of the hero overall. We'll see if that's enough of a buff. I mean, the other changes here are decent, but they can also be significant enough to make the hero not that great. So we'll see, because this hero's been in the meta for a while now. Then we have AA, just some changes with the hero that are really not that relevant. I mean, in the grand scheme of the whole patch, it's hard to say. I mean, there's some just number tweaks here that are good, some are bad. It's, again, one that I can skip over generally. Anti-Mage, there are some significant changes for this hero, mainly that Counterspell now is something you get all the time. It was kind of weird that you had to choose to have Counterspell as like an activated ability where you get the spell reflection. Now you can have it by default with both facets. That's kind of cool. And this facet now with the Mage Bane's Mirror, you get the burning of mana based on the ability that you're reflecting, and then 100% of that mana burned is damage. I don't know which one is going to be better, this one or the other one. It just kind of depends how it plays out. The bigger thing almost with this hero in general is just that, you know, Battle Fury has been changed. 200 gold, I don't know that that's a huge deal, but maybe that's enough because the, you know, sooner you get it, the better. But then that damage, you know, even early on, but even later into the game makes this hero not as good in some ways because that damage is very important. 15 damage can be significant. We'll just see how that plays out in the meta in general. Then Arc Warden, kind of a unique one where now it's a universal hero, which usually would be great, but the problem is that universal heroes are kind of nerfed now in general. I mean, I guess we'll see if that actually comes to fruition, but I feel like it does. So they kind of changed some of these things about the hero because it is now universal. The other big thing is obviously they changed some of this stuff with the facets. They changed a bunch of stuff about the abilities, but I'm going to skip over a lot of this stuff because I'm not an expert Arc Warden player. I'm not like an Arc Warden spammer, so I'm not going to kind of speak to each individual thing. But the bigger thing about the abilities and everything that it's, you know, had here that's been changed is obviously the universal, like I mentioned, but then Tempest Double cooldown decreased from these longer cooldowns to now shorter cooldowns, but the duration is now a lot shorter. So that is significant. I know they've been playing around with this a little bit, like making the Tempest Double last for a lot longer, but then the cooldown be a lot greater. Now the, you know, cooldown, you have to keep making your Tempest Double a lot more often, and it's only like half the time. You know, at the last level, you have it for 24 seconds, but it's a 50-second cooldown, so it's kind of half up, half down. So 24 on, kind of 26 off or whatever. I don't know how good that is. I feel like this is probably better when you had it for 60 seconds and then at the last level, you know, there was a 20-second downtime. That's obviously better for the downtime. I don't know. I'm just not an expert Tempest Double user with Arc Warden. Like, I don't know how good that is. That seems to be worse in my eyes. Switching over here, not just because of the time up and down, but also because now you don't, like, when you use it, you have to be more, like, you just really have to use it at the right times, because if you don't, you can get heavily punished, where before you had a whole minute to use it. So I think those are the biggest things, honestly, right now in general, but a bunch of changes for that hero overall. Then next we have Axe, just some general nerfs for the hero, not a huge deal. Bane, some adjustments being universal. Batrider, some adjustments being universal. Beastmaster, another universal hero getting adjustments, and some nerfs here to Call of the Wild Hawk. And then Bloodseeker is the next one that's kind of a big hero that we wanted nerfed or changed in this patch, and they did do that. So the facet has been buffed here, which again, not a huge deal, but really the big change is that they basically swapped the shard and the Ags, and they kind of changed that up a little bit. So now, basically, the passive here can be upgraded with Ag's Shard, and the Shard passively turns all of Bloodseeker's Overheal into the barrier. So that previously was on the Ags, now it's on the Shard. So that's a big thing too. Now upgraded with Ag's Scepter, Bloodseeker gains 30% lifesteal from all pure damage dealt. So that's important in some ways, because now all the pure damage that you deal gives you that lifesteal, which is good, but before you would have the shard and it would just give you the blood raged extra lifesteal damage, and that was kind of just easy. You didn't have to think about it, and it kind of just did more healing than you even did damage to yourself when you put blood rage on you. I don't know how much this works now in that way. It might still be pretty good, but it might actually make the hero a little bit worse. Plus, now your Ags is actually tied to Blood Rage, where now you don't just activate a new ability because it says removed blood mist ability. Now you kind of have that same AoE damage, but it's tied to Blood Rage. So it makes it so that when you're casting this on yourself, one, you can't cast it when you're silenced, obviously, which is the same thing for this. So it's not that big of a deal, but it's one of those where now this doesn't just sit on you like it did before and it doesn't go off until you deactivate it. Now you have to have Blood Rage on you. So you have to kind of keep applying it when you want. Also, once you apply it, it's there. You know what I mean? You can't just get rid of it. So it's a little bit more like high risk to actually activate it. So it is one of those where I think it does a lot of the same stuff that it did before. Also, Blood Rate is now pure, which I think is cool, because this being like a pure damage hero, pure damage for everything is pretty cool. I like that. I think that's a good concept. I also kind of like that we figured out how to actually use the blood mist ability and everything. You still kind of have that ability, just now obviously, like I said, it's tied in blood rage, but I like this change. We'll see if it kills the hero. I'm not so sure that it will, but maybe it will just completely, you know, now that's changed, people are like, forget Bloodseeker, it's dead now. Now people kind of need to relearn how to play it, but I don't think they completely destroyed it. Like, it still has some of the same things that it did before. So we'll just see how that plays out in the, you know, the patch over the next few months and things like that. I hope it doesn't go away completely, because I kind of liked how the design and everything, but it was just overpowered. I like that they kind of tried to keep the same design. Hopefully just nerfed it enough that it's not completely broken. That's the biggest thing with Bloodseeker. Then next we have Bounty Hunter. This hero got nerfed a little bit, but not a lot. I mean, I think it's one of those where you don't want to like destroy heroes even if they were pretty good, because the meta might change a lot, so we'll see how that works out. But some nerfs, but not a huge deal considering how good the hero was. Then Brewmaster, some changes because it's a universal hero, so again, nothing really crazy to talk about. Bristleback, the biggest thing is they removed the one facet that was just useless. They kind of changed Seeing Red a little bit to make it so you're not completely blind, and then they nerfed the hero overall with some mana cost and some other things like that, which was definitely needed. This hero was pretty good. If some people would say pretty broken. Then Broodmother is actually now an agility hero again. It used to be an agility hero for a long time. I think it was obviously a universal hero there for a bit. So then they adjusted some stuff. We'll see how that works. And then a change here. We'll see how that ends up playing out. And then Centaur, now damage done is now classified as reflection damage. That also is true up here with the Bristleback stuff. So we'll see how reflection damage actually ends up playing out. I think it's one of those things where it's a technicality, and sure, it's going to, you know, buff or nerf something in one way or the other, but it's just more of like a numbers thing. How does it feel? How much damage does it actually do at the end of the day? And that's really that's the more important part, honestly. Then next we have CK, and they deleted the facet that made his illusions better, which is the one everyone was picking. And now you have 3 facets. You have the old one where like your reality rift can do like silence and break and all that stuff, which is a little bit awkward. Then you have this weird one where now when you craft neutral items, 2 of his choices will be for the current tier and 2 of the choices will be for the next tier. Maybe that's broken, but maybe it's just terrible and nobody cares. I don't know. I feel like the default one is going to be this Chaos Bolt one that it can stun an additional target in like the area when you cast it. That's just going to be the obvious one, the easy one to pick, but we'll see if this one's broken. The other one's also kind of weird and can be good. It's more of almost like feels like a support or like an off-lane pick, so that's kind of weird. We'll see how that ends up playing out with Chaos Knight. Then Chen, now an intelligence hero, so they kind of changed some things here. Obviously now you can have this Marsh Mage, like the new creep convert, which is kind of interesting, but we'll see how good that is. Again, not a Chen player, so not a huge deal. Clinks, it's interesting that they now allowed you to have this tar bomb put on autocast, so now if you're attacking, it'll automatically recast this, which is pretty good. I mean, that's actually kind of good, so you don't have to like stop in the middle of attacking and recast it. You can now cast Death Pack while rooted, and then have alt cast mode, which disables teleportation, so you don't have to teleport every time, which that's also a good quality of life change. I don't think it like is ground breaking for the hero, but it definitely makes the hero a little bit better. But now the bonus movement speed decrease, so they kind of make some things a little bit better, but then make other things a little bit worse. So I kind of hate when they do that, to be honest. I know I rant about that every time, but it's kind of annoying, but whatever. Clockwork, now a strength hero, and just some adjustments for that. Now this hookup facet makes it so you can hook allies a little bit easier, but that's kind of whatever. Not a huge deal there. Oh, and the last thing for Clockwork, Battery Salt no longer deals bonus damage to creeps, which I don't like that they got rid of that. I mean, this hero was pretty cool, and I like that he could have some kind of farming ability, so I don't really like that they got rid of that, but whatever. Then Crystal Maiden, basically both facets are completely deleted, which is really interesting, and they kind of gave 2 new facets. This Glacial Guard one is pretty easy to understand. Basically, Crystal Nova, now when you cast it, obviously it does damage in this AoE. The AoE is also increased a little bit when you pick this, but also it gives a physical barrier for 4 seconds to allies. So like, it's kind of defensive as well as offensive. It's kind of interesting in that way. It gives dual purpose to this ability. Or the other one, which is Arcane Aura, is now castable, and you get 35% spell amp, but all of your abilities cost 50% more. But then anytime you cast an ability, any ally in an AoE gets 25% of the mana that you just used back for themselves, that's kind of weird and awkward, but kind of cool. I like the spell amp. It costs a lot of mana, so early on in the game, do you really want to be using this? I don't know, but hey, your ally gets more mana and you have spell amps, so that's great. This barrier can be great in the laning stage in general. It's hard to say which one's better overall. I mean, I think this Arcane Overflow is going to be better later on in the game, probably, obviously, when you don't have as much mana problems. This maybe is better for the laning stage. We'll just have to see. I do like these better than the old facets. These are more like unique, interesting, dynamic, that kind of stuff. So we'll see how that plays out with Crystal Maiden. Darkseer's now an intelligence hero. Just a small change there, back to being intelligence. Dark Willow back to being intelligence. The big thing with her is this facet for Shattering Crown. Makes Curse Crown kind of like a burst damage ability where you place it on a target. Then a lot of the damage that they take from you or allies kind of is then inflicted to that enemy at the end when Curse Crown like explodes, which is an interesting concept. It's kind of like I don't know, it's like a mini version of Maledict from Witch Doctor in a way, but just on the Cursed Crown, where like they take a bunch of damage and then they burst at the end after you take, you attack them and that kind of stuff. So interesting concept there. I don't know how good that actually is, but that is Dark Willow. Then Dawnbreaker needed a nerf. They kind of changed up the hero a little bit, removed the Gleaming Hammer facet, and then they kind of changed these two facets here. Not the biggest of deal. I mean, this one, Starbreaker, after the final smash, you get some buffs to you and your enemies, or this one, bonus move speed on the Celestial Hammer. Again, not a huge deal. I don't know which one's going to be better there. But then they did kind of change Solar Guardian a little bit with the way the scepter works. It kind of works in a similar fashion, but not in the exact same way with the delays and stuff like that. I don't really know how much of a nerf this really is on the hero. It does a lot of the same things, and the Ags really isn't the biggest of deal. I mean, it is important on the hero. It is good, but you don't even have to buy it every game. And I think that's kind of the bigger change here. I mean, facets kind of whatever. So I think the heroes can still be pretty good overall, even though they did nerf it on a lot of these other things as well too. Then next we have Dazzle, and obviously Universal Hero getting changed a little bit. But the biggest thing with this hero is a new ultimate ability, where basically when you cast it, you leave your body behind and you become a spirit, and it's like tethered together. So now you're controlling the spirit. Your body is vulnerable, so you have to kind of cast it in trees or back in the back of the fight, and then you can kind of go up into the fight and use all your abilities, and all of your abilities are now better than they were before. But you do have to be careful, like I said, because you can still get killed. And then once you get past, like, I think it's 1,600 units or something like that away from your body, then you get pulled back to your body. So it's kind of an interesting ult. This hero has been so weird with its ultimate for so long, with like the cooldown. It was a passive, and then you would cast it in AoE sometimes I don't know, many years ago to get armor and stuff. I don't know. It's just been so weird. Now they're changing it to another kind of weird one. But hey, maybe this actually makes this hero semi-good. There was a period of time where it was also a mid. It was like a core. I don't know if that's going to make this hero a core now. Maybe it is. I mean, this seems pretty good if you can cast it from a decent distance away and actually participate in the fight without getting jumped. But that is a big if, because you can't really, obviously, if your body's just going to die. Like, you're just going to sit there and die, which can be very annoying in a lot of different situations, I'm sure. So we'll see how that ends up working out for the hero. Death Prophet is now a universal hero. Interesting change. Some small changes with this hero. I wonder when this hero is going to get back in the meta. It feels like it's not been in the meta for a very long time, but every once in a while it comes back around and becomes like one of the best heroes in the patch. Disruptor, not too many changes here. I don't even know why they still have Kinetic Fence. They just need to get rid of it. It's so weird. Like, I've seen people pick it, and it's like, just stop picking that. Doom, they nerfed in some ways because the damage is decreased and the range is increased for casting, but they increased the damage on Infernal Blade. The bonus damage increase here no longer decreases damage if you have this facet. So overall, I think it is kind of a nerf to Doom, because honestly, the biggest thing was this hero prevented healing, and then the damage is very, very important. But this also makes a significant difference too. So it just depends which one you pick. But Doom is a decent hero. I still don't think it's really dead or anything like that. It can still be used in very specific situations. Dragonite is one that's kind of been killed. Now, it's not been killed in the sense that it still could be good, maybe, in certain other roles. Maybe this finally allows you to pick another facet, and it's good in one of those other facets. But as a carry that gets a free Battle Fury, like a Sven, it's pretty much dead, because the red fire dragon that you would pick every single time to get that AoE, now you have this, like, basically Dragon Tail buff, which is decent, and you get this attack that deals magic damage. So that's okay, but that's really not the best for the hero for farming like it was before free Battle Fury, because now you get this splash attack just on Elder Dragon form, which I guess you could activate and get that free Battle Fury when you have your ultimate. I just don't think it's going to be a carry like it was before. And then they also upgraded this Corrosive Dragon facet, which, I don't know. It's just hard to say which one's going to be better now. If this hero is going to get picked, maybe it's an offlaner, maybe it's a mid. It's just hard to say, because the old build is pretty much completely dead as far as I can see it. Drow, some small changes here, not a big deal. They keep wanting this hero to be better on high ground, which is interesting. And then Earth Spirit, again, nothing crazy, no huge changes. No longer dealing bonus damage to creeps, though, is important because now farming is really not very good on the hero at all because of that, which kind of sucks for any Earth Spirit player. But I feel like the hero kind of left the meta a long time ago. Next is Earthshaker, and really they didn't change anything fundamental about the hero. They just nerfed the kind of numbers across the board for everything he does, which I understand is needed. I'm glad they didn't completely kill the hero in terms of like changing how it works, because I like how the hero plays as a core. It's kind of interesting to me, even though it can be annoying at times. But just giving it overall number nerfs, I think, is definitely good and much needed. Elder Titan, really not that big of a deal. Small changes there. Ember Spear, some small changes, but significant. Searing Chains, unit count decreased from 3 to 2. This is back to 2. It was like always 2 for the longest time, and then they kind of buffed it recently. And then this cast point is also important. It went from 0.2 to 0. I think they were nerfing this cast point like back in the day, I don't know, a year or two ago, a bunch, and now it's 0 seconds. So activating the Remnant is now the same. It's still the same. And maybe that was the thing that they were nerfing. I can't really remember exactly which one it was, but having this now to 0 seconds is important. It is significant for casting, and especially with a hero like this where it's mobility based, then you have to escape things. It's all reaction based. That can be definitely something that is good on the hero. They also buffed Flame Guard. So even though this hero had the small nerf here, these other things are buffed overall. So, I mean, that can be good for the hero, but again, small changes. Enchantress, nerfed, but in kind of weird ways. I mean, Impetus no longer dealing 2 times damage to creeps can be significant for farming, so that's kind of annoying for the hero. Enigma, small changes because it's universal. Faceless Void, they're just making it so like, hey, don't pick Chronosphere. Here's like, I mean, mana cost is decreased, but like other things are not as good. And then this is just like the worst thing of all time. They just need to get rid of it, honestly, unless they're just going to buff it to insane degrees, which it seems like they kind of did, I guess. But I mean, the radius is now decreased. So it's like, dude, just make this thing insane if you actually want people to pick it. But I don't know. Is this going to put it over the edge? Maybe, but probably not, because it is just so bad, I feel like. But who knows? Eventually it'll be to the point, if they stick with it, where they make it so good that you have to pick it and it's actually good, and it's broken and it's annoying once people figure out how to actually use it. But I don't know. We'll see if we're actually getting to that point here in this patch. Grimstroke, small changes, not a big deal. Gyrocopter, small nerfs, again, not a big deal. And then we get on to Hoodwink. Hoodwink seems to be buffed all around. I mean, they removed the tree bounce trick shot facet. They have the go nuts, which cast range and attack range are now rescaled here. And then sharpshooter, which has this sharpshooter's 50% reduced cooldown. So that can be good. Seems, you know, hard to know which one is better, but they also made this base damage up to 80%. This range is now down a lot, but now you can get this, which is still pretty good. And now all sources of evasion are doubled during the duration of Scurry. So, I mean, it seems to me, and then this also 30% chance, 35% max. I mean, this seems to be buffs overall for the hero. It is kind of like a right-click hero, but the biggest problem with this hero is it always wanted to buy Gleipnir, and now that's nerfed a lot. So even though they buffed this hero overall, I still don't know if that, you know, the Gleipnir nerf might just like kill the hero as kind of this 4-position core building item hero. I mean, a lot of those like 4 positions like Hoodwink or, you know, Muerta that buy these Gleipnirs and stuff, a lot of those heroes might just be dead completely because they don't have a good like easy carry build that's also utility. Then Huskar, basically the Bloodbath and Nothel Transfusion facets are gone. Now you can just do extra damage with your spears, or you can get this facet where you can cast Berserker's Blood. It basically consumes health and then applies a Dispel, and then you gain more health later, which can be pretty interesting. I don't know how good that actually is. Obviously, you have to see that in action to know, but interesting concept and kind of, you know, goes with what the hero does. Invoker's now an intelligence hero, back to being intelligence, so they adjusted a bunch of things there, and then they adjusted literally everything about the facets and everything about the abilities. I'm not going to go into all the details because I'm not an Invoker player, so I can't tell you if this is good or bad. Being an intelligence hero, though, and like with all these things, I think it probably will not be a right-click hero anymore, I'm guessing. Maybe. I think that's probably what's going to happen. We'll have to see how that works out. But in this last patch, that was the thing that annoyed me the most. It was just like an insane right clicker, which was kind of weird. I mean, it can have that aspect to it, but having it from minute 1 for the rest of the game, and yes, you're annoying with all your spells, but you're also doing insane right clicks. I just don't love that. I like it to be more of like a chaos kind of team fighting, annoying hero, but not just also doing insane right clicks. And then IO is buffed a little bit, changed because of the universal hero status, but then Tether is buffed in general, now upgraded by Ag Shard, which I think is pretty good. We haven't seen IO in general for a long time. It's also mostly a pro kind of hero, but still, I don't mind having that buff. Jakiro is changed a little bit here now too. So used to have the Liquid Fire, Liquid Frost, these facets, and now they're kind of changed where you can basically have more damage on the one facet here, damage penalty is decreased, or you can have this ice path that explodes a second time when it's done and stuns people again. So that is pretty cool. I do like that, but also the fact that you now have Liquid Fire and Liquid Frost as default abilities is pretty cool as well. So I like all of this change. These changes to Jakiro make him like an even more unique hero with having kind of these 2 attack modifiers. You have that double attack, which is pretty cool, and now giving this upgrade to Ice Path is also cool. Jug is one of these where I hate when they do this. Cast range increased. That's cool, but now cooldown increased for Swift Slash. Like, come on. I mean, I guess this is just like a pub stomping hero, and that's why they did this, but still, very weird. I hate when they nerf it one way and then buff it another way, or vice versa. It's just like, why are you doing this? I don't like when they do that to these different kinds of heroes. Keeper of the Light is getting buffed a little bit just with the innate ability, Blinding Light, Spirit Form. It's kind of weird that he can't go below 75 mana. Like, I don't know that that is really that significant, but hey, it's something. Small buffs to the hero. Kez is being adjusted a bit. You know, they changed the facets here. They changed the abilities in kind of all these little ways with lifesteal. I mean, lifesteal overall has been changed, so that kind of makes sense, but then also little things like Talon Toss dealing physical damage, Shoto Sai no longer slows marked targets. There's just some of these things that are nerfs, but in some things they adjusted to be a little bit of a buff. But I think overall this is a nerf because Katana bonus damage is decreased. A lot of these other things seem like nerfs overall, so I think the hero is just a little bit worse. I did get a bunch of buffs, became insanely broken, which I said was going to happen, not to, you know, toot my own horn, but I knew it was good even when people were saying it was terrible, and then it had to get nerfed a bunch because it was so insane. I think it was still very good. It seems like they're nerfing it again, I guess, a little bit, probably because they want to put it in captain's mode eventually, and that kind of makes sense. Then Kunkka, nothing to see here. And then Legion Commander, they're just making this facet that nobody picks a little bit better, but nobody's going to pick it still. Because overall, they're still nerfing the hero overall. Like, they're nerfing the abilities a little bit here and there. For just mana costs and stuff like that. Duel especially is now not casting Press the Attack on Victory by default. Not that that's the biggest deal, but it is something. And so they're adding that to this. But still, people aren't going to pick that. It's just bad because you can potentially grief yourself and everyone else. And it's just like, why would you pick this? Just pick the other one that gives the damage barrier that lets you have a better laning stage anyway. That's probably the one that everyone's going to pick all the time anyway. And then Leshrac, Bloodstone was nerfed, so I mean, this hero hasn't been like that relevant anyway, so they're kind of buffing it just in small ways. Now, Lich just gets nerfs across the board. That was much needed for the hero. It was a very good support, if not the best support in the patch, honestly. So having all of his abilities basically nerfed is definitely good. It's not like completely killing the hero in terms of like removing everything it does, but just all the numbers on all of the abilities are worse. Lifestealer, kind of a significant change in the sense that there's facets that are changed here. Flesh Feast is now a little bit better. From when you kill heroes, you get more HP, which is kind of cool. And then open wounds can be reset if a hero dies while it's under its effect. But the other thing is that it's kind of nerfed as well because Infest can no longer target Ancient Creeps by default. You now have to pick Gore Storm to get that ability. So it's kind of like, which one do you really want? I don't think the Ancient Creep thing was that big of a deal. It's kind of always a little bit weird anyway. So it's just kind of like, I don't know. It's hard to really know if you're ever even going to pick this because do you really need the Ancient Creep all that much? Infested Creeps now lose percentage of their max HP a second. I don't know if that's a big deal, though, either. But, I mean, are you really going to play around this Infest that much? You'd probably rather have this overall. Then Lina is nerfed, don't get me wrong, but not nerfed to the extent that you think maybe she should be. Fiery Soul is nerfed a little bit, and now the Shard is applied to Laguna Blade, and you actually get a damage barrier that lasts for 10 seconds based on the damage you do with Laguna Blade. Flame Cloak is nerfed a little bit, but only by 1 second, and yes, Ethereal Blade is no longer as good for like this hero and stuff, so maybe late game it's not going to be deleting people as much, but it is kind of interesting that it wasn't as like giga nerfed as maybe you thought it should be, or I thought it should be. Most people think it should be. I mean, it's not as good, don't get me wrong, and then the talents are a little bit worse, of course, but still, it's kind of like, yeah, is this really the thing that's going to kill Lina? I mean, I guess maybe the level 25 talent is the thing, but still, I mean, this hero was insane, not just because of level 25. Like, it was all the way up to that. I think maybe it just falls off more, but then you can always transition to right-click later. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens with Lina in general. Lion doesn't kill illusions instantly, which kind of sucks. I like that happened. I don't like that they took this away, but I mean, it is a nerf. It is what it is. Lone Druid back to being agility, so they're adjusting everything based on that, making bare necessities a little bit better, but only early, so it's kind of whatever. This was broken at one point, but now it's kind of dead. Luna, just whatever. Some small changes there, but not a significant deal, like small buffs, whatever. Lycan is back to being a strength hero, and they nerfed Alpha Wolves, but I don't know how much they really nerfed it to the point, like, is this really that much worse? I don't know. I mean, people were complaining about Lycan. I didn't include him on the last video that I said of heroes that needed to be nerfed, but a lot of people were saying Lycan, especially in lower MMRs if somebody picks this and knows how to use Alpha Wolves. So it's just interesting that they didn't give this hero more nerfs for those insane Alpha Wolves. So that's something to look out for sure. Magnus is a universal hero, so they changed some of these things, and then they finally got rid of reverse polarity and reverse polarity facets. Basically, you just have RP normally, which is cool, and then you have a facet where you can upgrade your shockwave to be a little bit better, or you can go for the more offensive, like farming ability, where you get this facet and your empower is always enabled on you, and you just basically don't really have to cast it, and you just get this better version of Empower, which is pretty cool if you're going for that more right-click damage version of Magnus. Who knows, maybe this hero can be a carry now. It's hard to really say exactly until you kind of see how good it is, but those are much needed changes because reverse polarity was just stupid. I mean, it's kind of funny that it existed, but I'm glad it's gone. Then Marcy, this was another hero where the facets and the passive, it's just like was a little bit awkward, so they kind of just reworked the whole thing. Now you have this buddy system. It was still sort of the same thing that it was before, but now you're getting 100% of the health healed every time with your ally that you cast it on, which is pretty cool. Or you have Pick Me Up, which basically allows you and the ally that you're like rebounding off of to go to that target, which is really cool for getting aggressive. That's, again, another kind of like a support ability. This is more like defensive. This is more aggressive. And then you have Fleeting Fury, which is more of the kind of damage dealing core version of the hero, where now when you have Unleashed leveled, if you land from rebound, you gain a short Fury combo, or you increase the duration of Unleash if it's already active. So you basically get more duration on your ultimate once you use rebound, which is pretty cool. So I like this change because the other facets were just a little bit weird and awkward, not really that good. And then the other thing that's kind of notable is that this special delivery now has an active component where you can just instantly teleport your courier to you, which it's not like insane, not like the most broken thing ever, but that is good. Don't get me wrong. Like, that's pretty cool. That's good. I like that instead of the boring thing that it was before. It's kind of like they're changing a lot of these boring ones they just threw in there half-assed, and now they're actually like, they are, even if they're not completely different, they're at least more dynamic, better, have some skill to them. There's something there that's interesting. Mars, small changes, not a big deal. Now you provide bonuses to all the allies in the arena when an enemy dies, where this Dauntless effect only affects Mars himself, so it's kind of whatever. Is that a big deal? I mean, who knows? Not huge changes for Mars. Now Medusa, the big change with this hero is now you can upgrade Split Shot with Ag's Scepter, and allows on-hit effects to apply to secondary effects. So basically like Scotty to all of your Split Shot, which is interesting. So the level 25 talent of Split Shot is now 40 intelligence, so that's interesting. And then Mystic Snake is no longer upgraded by Ag's Scepter. So that's one of those where I think this is probably worse overall for the hero, just because, you know, you'd like to have that ability to go for that Stone Snake version, and then you also at level 25, when you eventually get there, you have the Split Shot anyway. So it's kind of annoying that that's gone, but who knows, maybe this allows for the hero to have a better timing earlier on in the game where you can go for like, you know, Manta Scotty Ags or whatever, and then you just have this insane timing. So we'll see if that's how that kind of ends up working out for the hero. Meepo, not huge changes there, just kind of little changes, whatever. Mirana is now an agility hero again. Again, one of these heroes that just bought Gleipnir every time, like even if it was support probably, and also with a core, as a core. So it's interesting now that it is an agility hero again. They also changed from Moonlight Shadow and Solar Flare facets to now just having Moonlight Shadow. So back to that original thing, because the Solar Flare was a little bit awkward. I think you just rather have Moonlight Shadow, even if you are a core. And now you have Starstruck, which basically does this Star Storm facet, or you have a Leap facet, which roots targets. So I think this is more of the support one. This is more of like the farming core one. That's how I would kind of think about this in general for these changes with Mirana. The big change with Monkey King now is that the Tree Dance facet that everyone was going for, where you had this like 0 cooldown for Tree Dance, now it's changed a little bit where you have to get to level 5 for that. You get 1 point automatically when you pick this. So it just nerfed in the sense that it's not broken level 1, which is what it was basically before. So now you have to put all those levels into Tree Dance to actually get it to the point that it was before. That is pretty interesting for the nerf overall with the hero. Then Morphling has been changed pretty significantly. So basically Adaptive Strike is now 1 ability, and it's kind of merged all into that 1. It's not going to be as good as before, because now you can choose Ebb, which basically makes waveform attack targets, which it doesn't do by default now, or have that more like basically your Adaptive Strike doesn't knock back enemies anymore, and now it's more of your agility-based Adaptive Strike. That's kind of the focus of it. But over here now, Flow is the strength-based Morphling, where actually it switches Morphling's primary attribute to strength, and he gets 1% spell amp per 4 agility. Its spell amplification effect is breakable, like obviously with most things like that. But obviously then Adaptive Strike changes a little bit as well based on your strength, which it causes that knockback and that stun. So it's a little bit awkward. I think this makes this hero a little bit worse. Now that you don't have a stun by default, you have to pick this one if you want that extra attack. It just makes the hero worse overall. Also, Morphling keeping his attributes while morphed, that I don't know if that's like really good or really bad. I'm not the biggest morph player. I know that it could probably be good in some situations and bad in some others. It can obviously be good in certain situations where you're maybe trying to morph into a support that's kind of squishy, but it also can be bad if you want to morph into like a tanky hero. So it kind of just depends, I think. But overall, I think nerfs for Morphling, which are much needed. This is a very annoying hero. I like to make him a little bit more one-dimensional and not as like just completely broken and stompy and smurfy in that way. Muerta, not a huge deal for this hero in terms of changes, but now you can upgrade Deadshot with Ag Scepter, and now it basically just like goes through, like pierces through enemy heroes when it fears them, and it's an AoE ability, so that could be interesting. Not sure how actually good that is. And then there's Naga, small changes, whatever, not a big deal. Nature's Prophet, a little bit awkward. Sprout with the Soothing Saplings. It does double heal when you consume a tango on it. It's like, okay, cool, whatever. And then Spirit of the Forest, Treant Multiplier rescaled, and so they nerfed this a little bit here, which probably was needed because that was a very annoying Treant, to be honest, but otherwise, oh, it's now a universal hero too. So they've made some of these changes, and they're changing a lot of heroes back from universal to, like, you know, agility and strength and intelligence, but there are a few heroes that are becoming universal, but overall now there's only like 23 universal heroes, and there's really not, like, there's not many. They might be phasing universal out, to be honest. Necro, some small changes here, just some small nerfs on Heartstopper and stuff like that. This Rapid Decay was buffed, but it's really not that good. So, I mean, you might pick it now. Who knows? It just depends on matchups, maybe. Night Stalker changes basically with the facets. Now this one that is like switching the night and everything. It also changes Roshan a little bit. You also get Hunter in the Night free level 1, which is always weird that people pick this because you would usually skill Void anyway. So it's like now you have to wait till level 2 to even really get anything out of it, which is really awkward. So that's kind of cool now. And then this Voidbringer one, now you actually get it by default too, because increases the max level of Void to 5, which is kind of interesting if you pick this. And now deals 400 damage, has 4-second night duration, and becomes a point target ability with an AoE. So that kind of, I mean, 300 AoE, that's not huge, but it's kind of like what Ags was in a way. It's just a little bit interesting that this is now on this facet. So we'll see how that affects Night Stalker overall. I always thought this other one, I hated the one where it switched the night. That was my personal opinion. I just thought it was a waste because, yes, it's good in the laning stage, but like whatever. I'd rather have the stuff that's better later on and just hope to get something out of the laning stage. But that's just me. That's just kind of my personal opinion with playing a hero like that, especially in pubs, not going for something that is good in the lane. Just go for that later game ability. Then Nyx is nerfed pretty heavily, basically just because Mind Flare no longer instantly kills creeps. All of these other changes and nerfs are, yeah, whatever, but really this is the big one because this is what allowed this hero to be so good, because you could farm extremely quickly on the hero. You could obviously one-shot these big creep camps and just farm a ton and not really have to worry about the fact that your laning stage is honestly not very good. But now that you can't do that, I think that really kills the hero. If you can still have a good game, like a good lane and stuff like that, you can still do a decent amount on the hero, because it still does a lot of the same kinds of things, but then also we have bonus damage decreased from 25 to 20%. So that's another big problem for the hero. With basically what it wants to do is run around and blow people up. So I think it's a big nerf to Nyx. I don't think it's going to be picked that much, but who knows? I mean, maybe it'll end up being not that bad after all, even despite all of this, but I don't think that's the case. Then Ogre, just some small nerfs there, not really a big deal. Omni Knight, small buffs. Oracle, like small buffs, I guess. Really not a huge deal. OD, another one that is really not changed very much at all. Just a small change on this for a buff that is like 1%. It's kind of like whatever. And talent changes. Pango, not really touched very much. Just a universal hero that gets adjustments. PA is one that has been touched pretty significantly. Veiled one facet, that one's completely gone. That's the one I actually preferred, even though Methodical was so good and getting picked a lot, and even in pros. And the reason why I like the other one is because basically Blur was dispelled or went away every time you were trying to farm in the side lanes. I didn't really like that, because in pubs it's way better to be invisible and not really be seen when farming side lanes, because you can't always rely on your team. So even though Methodical was better overall just in like a pure damage standpoint, I personally liked the Veiled one facet. But now, because Blur isn't removed by attack or on attack by default, I think that really makes it better that you're going to pick Methodical every time, because they got rid of Veiled one and Sweet Release, which Methodical was already really good. I mean, they did decrease the crit, so that makes it worse, but this one just seems bad. Like, you send out Stifling Daggers and it like stacks on an enemy for 6 seconds, and then it like shoots daggers out after the unit dies. I mean, I guess that's good for farming, but it's still like really weird. Like, I don't know, like maybe I have to see it in action and see it being played, and maybe it just like increases your farm, and maybe like, oh, now we don't have to like get a Battle Fury and stuff. But is that true? I don't think that's going to happen. Overall, this hero is nerfed pretty significantly, though, so maybe it is kind of dead. It was one of those heroes that kind of came back up in the meta and people realized it was really good. And it got picked in one of the last big pro tournaments a lot, so it was one of the more popular carries. So it makes sense that they're nerfing it a bunch, but we'll see how this works out with the facets. But I just don't think this one's very good. Then PL, much needed buffs, because this hero's like dead. But I don't think this is really enough to make the hero good, unless for some reason it's like an illusion patch, which maybe it is, I guess. But I don't think it really will be. We'll see if this hero ever becomes, comes back into the meta, unless they change something drastic about the hero. Then we have Phoenix, now a strength hero again, and some small buff on this facet, not a big deal. Primal Beast, some changes here. Basically, they got rid of the one Romp and Stomp facet, and they basically gave him an Uproar facet, which is nice. And then you can still have this Pulverize facet, which is pretty good. I don't know which one's going to be better overall, honestly. We'll have to kind of see with that. This Uproar facet does seem decent. You get stacks from taking damage and being hexed and stunned and stuff like that, but I don't really know how good that actually is overall. We'll have to see. I mean, it can be good in the lane, things like that. We'll just have to see. But Pulverize obviously is really good, so again, it just has to be played to see how good it is in game. Puck is one that desperately needed nerfed, and the biggest thing on this hero was the passive, and so they are nerfing this significantly, because every time you like disjointed stuff, you got more health and mana. That was kind of insane. So that's the biggest thing that they nerfed on the hero, which is kind of crazy that that's the only thing. I mean, yes, mana cost and some of this other stuff, but still, I don't know if that's enough to kill the hero. I think it's still pretty good overall. But again, this is a patch that's more about the big stuff, not the individual hero changes. So even the good ones, they're not like completely destroying. Pudge, the big change for this hero is now you have this Rot and Core facet, which is interesting because as Rot is active, like as it keeps being active for more and more seconds, you gain more and more bonus attack damage. So this is really good for Pudge as a core hero, because you can just turn on Rot, you have your bonuses that you can kind of resist the damage, and then you just get more right-click attack damage. This hero can do significant right-click damage, don't get me wrong. Like, it can actually be a significant threat. So I like that, kind of like having, it's a trade-off thing. Like, the longer you have this active, the more right-click you're getting, and the more damage you're doing. And then you just like kind of want to go all in for that, but you don't want to deactivate it, that kind of stuff. I do like this kind of you know, risk reward kind of thing. And then the facet that everyone was picking was basically the Flayer's hook facet, where you just got insane damage on the hook, like, because the distance that they were pulled, if you hit long hooks, they were just like, the hero would just die. Now you can still do the same thing, but you get that on the shard for meat hook. It's basically the same kind of thing. So that's really the big difference there. Then Pugna Life Drain no longer instantly kills illusions. That's kind of a big deal. And otherwise, they kind of adjusted this a little bit as well, which that can be pretty good. But I think I was saying something about PL up here, about him not really getting much love, but there are a lot of changes where things don't kill illusions, so who knows, maybe it could be an illusion patch, we'll have to see. Then Queen of Pain, not too many big changes here, other than the fact that Masochist is a big nerf, because now you take 25% of the damage that you were dealing, where before it felt like this Masochist, people were like, well, why would you want to do damage to yourself? But then with the spell lifesteal and stuff, it felt like, okay, well, I don't even care about this, I'm just gaining all the spell damage. We'll see if that really works now. I don't know, with the adjustments to lifesteal and spell lifesteal and all that kind of stuff, and then this increased reflection damage, it's hard to say. It's kind of more of a numbers thing, a feel thing of when it actually is played in the game. Do you take a lot of damage yourself and it feels really bad? It's hard to say. Otherwise, they're not, you know, the nerfs weren't huge here. And actually initial damage is increased here. So it's like, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's all about the feel of how much damage you're taking from Masochist. And that's really, because that's what made the hero good, to be honest. Small changes for Razor then. The shard no longer pulls people in, it just slows people. That's really the only deal there. Ricky, some small buffs to both facets, but a nerf to Smokescreen, which is interesting. Then Ringmaster kind of changed with the facets. Basically, the old Ringmaster, or the normal one, is just the Carney Classics. And now you have Sideshow Seekers, which gives you like more abilities. Crystal Ball, which allows you basically to have like a scan where you can just globally look at a 450 area and you know if there's heroes there, invisible units too. It's pretty cool. I actually like that. Then the unicycle, where you just ride around on a unicycle for a while, for 10 seconds, which is like interesting. You can like destroy trees and things like that, but you're slowed, and you can't really do anything else. It's more like an escape. And then Weighted Pie, which tosses a pie at an enemy and knocks them back and reduces their vision. So it's kind of like an offensive ability here. I don't know. These ones are, this save is very, very, very good. It's really good. It's probably one of the best abilities of the hero, to be honest. So it's, I don't know. Do you want the save, or do you want this like scan ability? I think that's almost like what you should be thinking about, really, because these two other abilities are kind of whatever. This scan seems insane. I mean, Weighted Pie is not bad, don't get me wrong, but I don't know. The save is just, do you want the mirror thing? Then Rubik, small changes there, small buff to the one Frugal Flitch. Sanking, very small adjustments, nothing you're really to speak of. Shadow Demon, nerfs here, which this hero was very good, did need to be nerfed. Not killed by any means, but definitely nerfed. Shadow Fiend was nerfed a few patches ago and completely died, and Feast of Souls is absolutely trash, and still is trash, so they're buffing that a little bit, which is interesting now, but who knows if that's even still good at this point. Just one of those things that it was bad back then, they nerfed everything else, and people still don't really like it, so it's not like, even though they've buffed it twice now, so this is just a bad ability overall, I think. It doesn't synergize well with the hero. Then Shadow Shaman has been changed and nerfed, thankfully. They got rid of Cluster Cluck, which was super, super annoying, and then they gave him Chicken Fingers, which now it's kind of interesting. When you attack enemies, they turn into a chicken for a second. So that's pretty annoying, but pretty good, and obviously not as annoying as Cluster Cluck. That's just, I hated that. Everyone hated that. Foul Play is now upgraded by Ag Shard, so it increases the damage reduction, which is interesting. And upon triggering Foul Play, 3 uncontrollable chicken illusions will spawn. So that's kind of the same similar kind of thing, which was happening before, but at least, you know, you have to get Ag Shard, which is not nearly as annoying as it once was, but it still is annoying. The other thing that's interesting is that Shackle no longer upgraded with Ag Shard, now upgraded with Ag Scepter, and the Mass Serpent rewards are no longer upgraded with the Scepter. This is really weird because basically your Shackles deal Ether Shock, which is like, is that even good? Because, like, I don't know. You'd rather upgrade your Serpent wards, and then you'd rather have your Shackles giving those Serpent wards when you shackle something. I think this is just overall a huge nerf to the hero. I don't like that this is the way that they did this. I do like that they kind of, but they didn't even get rid of it fully. They kind of made the hero less annoying with the stupid, like, free save and stuff, but that didn't really change the hero completely. They made the hero's definitely worse, but it's worse in the ways that I don't like. Get rid of the annoying stuff and keep the stuff that's cool, but they didn't really do that. So I don't know. It just sucks that I don't think this shackle with the axe is really worth it anymore because of the Ether Shock and stuff. And like, you can cast it on both enemies and allies, so it's like, okay, the Ether Shock just goes in this AoE, but like, are you really gonna do that? I mean, I don't know. It's just a little bit awkward. Silencer is another one that I really don't like. I mean, they changed a lot of stuff about the map and everything in this patch, but the hero changes are sometimes they're good, but sometimes like this, I don't really love this one at Shadow Shaman. I really don't like Silencer. They just reverted this back to the behavior pre 7.36. So it's just the old Silencer. Old Arcane Curse, old Last Word, and old Glaives of Wisdom, basically. So just as the old Silencer where you silence people and you cast Arcane Curse on the last worded people and they take more damage. Like, it's pretty boring. I understand if you didn't want Silencer to be the same as he was and you wanted to nerf him, but they're like, don't make it, I don't know, don't do what you just did, which is just revert him back. Because, like, no one was asking for that. Make this hero a core. Make this hero a mid. Change something about it. Don't just revert him back. I don't know, it's very annoying. Then Skywrath nerfed for damage overall. I think the hero is definitely decent. But I don't think it was, I don't know, maybe it was more broken than I really remembered, but it seems kind of odd that they nerfed it so much. Again, it's not like completely destroying the hero overall, but it's definitely not as good. I mean, don't get me wrong, no longer has a creep damage penalty. This can be good for farming, but still. Then Slaughter, I think buffs overall for the hero. Just definitely buffs on the Ag Scepter. I think this is a buff, plus 80% instead of just plus 300 on the Ag Scepter puddle radius. Maybe that's, again, that's one of those you have to like plug it in, look at it, see how it actually works, but who knows, maybe I think that's probably better. But HP regen increased, and then regen on Scepter increased, all this other stuff, very good. Armor transfer increased. So overall, I think this hero might be, honestly, could be the off lane of the patch with all these buffs. We'll have to see about that. Plus the water in the side lanes, like, honestly, could be insane on the hero. Then Slark, I think this hero was already decent. Wasn't like insane by any means, but now they gave basically minus armor as a debuff whenever you hit people. So that just makes this hero better, because what this hero wants to do is right click people, and then once you get some stacks, you just start doing insane damage and you're very hard to kill. So that's pretty cool. They keep decreasing the radius of this, which is kind of insane. 225 is like nothing. Like, you have to be right in the middle now to actually get Depth Shroud like bonuses, but still pretty decent buff to the hero, I think. Then Snapfire, really not a huge change, honestly. Attack damage increase, I guess that's fine for the core Snap, but like at the end of the day, Gleipnir's nerfed, so I don't, it's not a huge deal. Sniper is one that people like hate. Honestly, this hero is very annoying. So now Take Aim now has an overhead indicator when the ability is active, which definitely helps you know like when the hero is going to be hitting you for a lot of damage, I guess. But does that really make the hero that much worse? And then some talent changes, but I mean, I still think this hero is kind of a menace in pubs. And then Spectre's another one that definitely does need nerfed. This hero is very good, has been good for a long time, and is now a universal hero. So, I don't know. That probably is a nerf. I mean, based on everything that's happening in this patch, that's almost certainly a nerf. Very odd that they chose this hero to be universal, but I mean, it is what it is. And then they kind of changed the facet. Now this Forsaken facet, which nobody was picking. Desolate deals 1.75 times damage. But his illusions can no longer trigger Desolate, which is terrible. I mean, Manta's so good on the hero. It makes you take Roshan and everything so much. I don't really know why you would still ever take this. That seems terrible. And then no longer decreases the cooldown. I mean, I guess that makes this worse, but I still think you pick this, because not having, Desolate on your illusions is still bad. Dispersion, damage reflect decreased. Cooldown increased, definitely needed for all this kind of stuff, especially at the last level. And then this is important, doesn't allow you to jump in and out as freely. I still think the hero can be very good, though. I just think, honestly, if anything, the universal hero change might just like completely destroy the hero. Then Spirit Breaker, remove this facet, imbalanced, and then Bulls hit greater bash chance, increases if you bash more than one hero within the last 10 seconds. So if you get super lucky, you just can bash more, which is kind of insane, but I mean, that is what it is. I feel like, 17%, that's just fake. It's actually like 50%. I swear it's like ridiculous on this hero how much you actually bash. Then Storm, this is not a big deal, like whatever, kind of one change that isn't a huge deal overall. Sven overall is buffed. This hero is one of those that they keep trying to bring him back into the meta, and by they, I don't even mean Valve. It's like people that play Dota, like pros and stuff, that are like, oh, Sven might be good, let's try to play him. And I feel like he kind of tries to come into the meta a little bit, every so often, and then it's just like, nah, this hero's trash. So I think that they're going to keep buffing him here and there, I think. And again, I feel like I hate when they do this. They like buff the hero overall in a lot of different ways, but then cleave damage rescaled to 95% at the last level. It's like, dude, why do we do this? I hate these kinds of nerfs and buffs. Maybe it's just that Ice Frog's gone, and now the old person that was patching it keeps doing these weird things, and I hate that. That's just my personal opinion, though. Facets for techies, the one is reworked, where now you can stack all previously selected enchantments into a newly crafted neutral item, which is, I don't know, that's kind of interesting and weird. I don't know if that's good. Who knows? That might be broken. It might also just not matter at all. It's kind of weird. TA seems to be buffed for the most part, but then nerfed in other ways too. Again, like one of these weird ones, which I hate when they do this. Ag Scepter no longer grants 100 bonus damage, which again wasn't that big of a deal, but there are other, you know, buffs here where you get this hidden reach thing, which is pretty cool. Psyblade range and split amount decreased early on, but still at the end it's still, you know, maxed out. So yeah, I guess it is buffed in terms of agility gain and some other things like here, like the facet, but then it's also nerfed over here. So I don't, it's just one of these weird things. Does this really do anything overall for TA? I don't know. Terrorblade, Terror Wave Metamorphosis duration increased. Okay. Is that what? I don't even know. I mean, I guess this is one of those weird, I feel like they should have done something more to like nerf the offlane version of the hero. I mean, I get the talents have been changed here, but like nobody wants to play this hero offlane or see it offlane anymore. They did buff Tide though, which is pretty cool. I want to see Tide carry more. That would be pretty awesome. Having this Krill Eater facet doesn't really help at all, but still, I mean, having this just being able to block, or double the block is pretty cool. Timbersaw is just like one of these heroes that just keeps coming back into the meta no matter how much they nerf him. So they're nerfing him again on the Twisted Chakram and also the just general Chakram in general. The general in general. They're nerfing him overall for damage numbers, which is just definitely much needed. Also mana cost. It's like this hero's been so good for so long. Tinker, they just need to rework the hero. If anything, they put Silencer back to where he was. Just put Tinker back to where he was, guys. Please, just do it. Like, why don't you do it? They're buffing him a little bit, but who cares? Nobody cares. And then Tiny, they're trying to kill this hero off. It felt like it went out of the meta for a while and then kind of just surged back into the meta as like a mid or a 4. And now they're just getting rid of all this extra toss damage that it had for avalanche tosses, which it just like deleted people. Like it did so much insane amounts of damage that it was just absurd. So now they're kind of getting rid of a lot of that, which I don't know if that kills the hero, but it probably kills the hero because the whole right click version of the hero is just pretty much dead as far as I'm concerned. And I think it is dead overall. So now this extra magic damage is just not very good anymore, so it's probably going to be gone for a while until it's dead for a long time, and then they buff it or change it in some way. For Treant, they gave him small buffs, but then they also nerfed the Nature's Guise, so that when you're attacking, like before, when you were attacking, they wouldn't see you until you actually attacked, but now they can see you, which I don't know why they would do that. I mean, it is annoying, but like, why would you change that? And then Troll Warlord, this is pretty interesting. Now with this bad influence facet, he basically has unlimited attack speed, which is kind of insane. I mean, I don't really know. I haven't looked at it or done the math, but you have more fervor stacks, you have unlimited attack speed. That could be pretty broken. It's hard to say. I don't know if it's good compared to the other facet. We'll have to see, but it seems kind of interesting. And then Tustus Drinking Buddies, I just don't feel like Drinking Buddies is good, so they kind of changed that here, made it a little bit better. But then Walrus Kick was the thing that made this hero ridiculous because you could kick people into Fountain and all this kind of stuff, so they nerfed that overall a little bit there. Then Underlord, just, you know, talent change is not a big deal. Undying, some small buffs and small nerfs, so like really not a big deal overall, I think. I just hate when they do this. Slow decreased, but then damage increased. Like, stop doing this kind of stuff. It's so weird that they do this. Ursa, level 10, 15 talent change. Venge is now an agility hero, so back to being an agility hero, which is interesting. And then a buff to the passive, but again, not a big deal. Veno adjusted because he's universal. Viper, Nosedive now releases Nether Toxin upon landing. Okay, I guess that's a small buff, but whatever, not a huge deal. And then Visage, they didn't really nerf the hero. They kind of just like buffed the fastest that nobody's picking, which is interesting. I mean, universal heroes are worse, so that definitely makes this hero not as good. And level 10 talent is not as good, but still, like, I don't know. I feel like the hero needed more nerfs, something than this. I mean, maybe the universal thing just killed him, but it's hard to say exactly. Void Spirit, small changes, but a universal hero probably not as good, but they buffed 8th Remnant a little bit, I guess. Warlock, small change, not a big deal. I mean, the upheaval slow linger duration is a lot less. That definitely makes the hero not as annoying, but it's obviously a lot worse now for Warlock players. Weaver, the swarm attacks to destroy increased a little bit, not a huge deal. And then Wind Ranger, we have some big changes here. Obviously, another universal hero that's kind of killed by the Gleipnir change, but I mean, it is what it is. They also changed the facets here, so you have a shackle shot facet now that applies to all units and trees behind the target, which is pretty interesting. And each shackled hero now provides damage, which is another kind of just upgrade. Just makes shackle shot not just like, okay, I'm just stunning. It actually gives you damage, so you want to use it a little bit more. Or you can go for the power shot one. The arrow instantly executes enemy heroes below a certain health. So that was something that was already incorporated in, I think, wasn't that already incorporated in like the shard or something at one point? I feel like this was existed, but now they're putting it back here in the kill shot thing, which is kind of interesting. It's like a long range aimable axe culling blade, which is kind of weird. And then some changes here, which is not a big deal. Then Winter Wyvern, another one where now it's an intelligence hero. So you can see a lot of these universal heroes are kind of going away. And then facets they changed where now you can do Winterproof, Cold Embrace can be cast on buildings, which is honestly pretty huge. I feel like that's gigantic. I don't know if it's enough to make the hero playable, but there's not a lot of hero changes in this patch, to be honest. I mean, there's some big ones, but this is a huge one. I mean, casting this on buildings, I don't see how that's not broken, to be honest. If the building is under the effect of Cold Embrace and Glyph, the buff duration is paused, which is kind of ridiculous. I mean, I guess the duration is paused, but it doesn't still have the healing. I don't know. I'd have to test that out. Then we have Winter's Curse, the facet over here, this is more for the offensive one, obviously, because it makes all affected enemies take 125% physical, magical, and pure damage from Winter Wyvern. So obviously, if you're going for like core, you're picking this one. If you're going for support, you're picking this one. It's pretty straightforward. Witch Doctor, small changes. I guess they just removed Voodoo Festration facet, which was the one that was broken, I think, for the longest time, but that kind of got nerfed and then it just went away. The hero wasn't, I mean, people weren't really focusing on that as much anyway. Then Wraith King, the facets are staying the same, they're just changing a little bit. So heroes now give 2 skeleton charges, and then they change the talents based on this. And then Spectral Blade, they change the talents based on this one too. So it's really, honestly, not a huge deal overall. And then lastly, for the last hero, for the last thing of the patch, we have Zeus. So again, facets changing slightly here. Damage increasing, the min damage and the max damage on Livewire. And then Divine Rampage, the amplification per kill increased. But the thing is, obviously they did nerf phylactery and all that kind of stuff, but I don't know if they necessarily nerfed it for Zeus in every single way, because obviously now Khanda's kind of better, I guess, sort of, for spellcasters compared to like right-click heroes. Now, phylactery definitely is way worse overall. I mean, it is just straight up nerf, so we'll have to kind of see about that. But having these buffed is significant. But now mana cost increase, so that obviously is a nerf. And then the jump radius decreased too. So more nerfs. And then heavily jump, some other changes there that aren't the biggest of deal, but obviously makes the hero a little bit worse overall. So I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, I don't think the changes on this hero are huge. I think, if anything, it's about the phylactery and Khanda changes. Does that kill the hero? I don't know. It's hard to say until you actually see it. So anyway, I hope you guys like the video. I mean, I don't know how long this is going to end up being. Hopefully it was shorter than other people's videos. My voice is kind of dead at this point. Hopefully I'll get this up in a few hours after the patch is actually posted. Thoughts on the patch, I really like it in terms of general changes for the map, everything. I think these are all good changes. Hero changes kind of sucked, but I mean, I understand they're just changing things overall on the map in general, and that can honestly have a bigger mix-up than the heroes anyway. It is interesting. They seem like they're just getting rid of universal heroes. I don't mind that. I don't really know why they even brought universal heroes into the game as a thing. So, but overall, all the map changes, like the camps and the shrines and all that, I really like that, the upgrade of the camps, like evolving over time, and Roshan changes. This is all really good stuff. And even the neutral items, like those changing, is interesting and kind of cool. So I do like that, even though I don't really love neutral items in general. So anyway, guys, I hope you liked the video despite my voice and my sickness. Hopefully I'll be back making more videos as my voice kind of comes back to full use here in a bit. So anyways, thanks everybody for watching. If you like the video, like, comment, subscribe, all those kinds of things. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.